Welcome everyone to Legally Speaking. I'm Kenya Johnson.
And I'm Sonia Brown. Legally Speaking is brought to you by the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, GABWA.
GABWA is a voluntary bar association that seeks to advocate for children and women and also seeks to empower our communities. Please remember, this show is not intended to give legal advice, so should you have a legal concern, it's always important to contact an attorney.
Today's topic, elder abuse. According to the National Center on Elder Abuse is an under-recognized problem with devastating and even life-threatening consequences. Elder abuse can occur anywhere, in the homes, nursing homes, and other institutions. It affects seniors across all socioeconomic groups, cultures, and races. Today, we'll talk to two attorneys who specialize in combating this issue.
Our guests today are experts in the field of elder abuse. When we come back, we'll hear from attorney Donald Horace and Assistant District Attorney Angel Riley with DeKalb County.
Stay with us. There's more to come on Legally Speaking. Welcome back to Legally Speaking. I'm Sonia Brown. Our topic today is elder abuse, and our guests today are attorney Donald Horace and Assistant District Attorney with DeKalb County, Angel Riley. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you here. So before we get started talking about this topic, why don't you two tell us what it is that you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you stated, I am an Assistant District Attorney in DeKalb County, where Robert James serves as our DA for the county. I am assigned to the White Collar Elder Exploitation and Abuse Unit, where we prosecute crimes that are committed against disabled adults and elders.
Okay.
And again, my name is Donald Horace. I am a solo practitioner in DeKalb County. My law firm practices elder law, which can be a number of things. It can be something as simple as a will, preparing advance directives, protecting seniors from elder abuse, which comes in many forms, and also providing counsel on how to plan for end of life and for your assets.
Donald, share for our viewers, what is elder abuse and what are some of the warning signs?
Okay, that's a very good question. Elder abuse comes in many forms and in many fashions. Typically, it's abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Abuse can be something as overt as I've had clients come in where they've had a family member throw boiling water on them, where they've been tripped or physically beaten, or it can be in a form of neglect where a senior is not properly fed or the medication's withheld, or their doctor's appointments are missed on purpose. Sometimes it's done as a form of punishment on the senior. The caregiver, which is often a family member, will feel that the senior doesn't appreciate them or they're just after the assets. And the last form of elder abuse you typically see is the exploitation, and that's just simply taking their money and spending it on themselves. Some of the signs that I have seen and I tell my clients about is if you know that your dad does not have a driver's license and he's buying a car, that's a big flag that somebody's taking advantage of the senior. And there are a number of things that you can do to kind of cut that off, which I'm sure we'll get into later on.
And we're talking about elder abuse, but I know for me it's probably not something we hear a lot about or we talk a lot about. Is it a crime that is being reported? And if it isn't, why is it an invisible crime?
It's very underreported. National statistics seem to suggest that it's double the amount that actually is being reported, and that may be for various reasons. One, it typically is someone that you know. 40% of the crimes that we see is the adult child, and so it may be the senior, the mother, the father trying to protect their child. It may also be the fear of going into a nursing home. If that son or daughter is the sole caregiver for the senior, and knowing that they report the abuse and the prosecution and possible conviction and incarceration of their loved one will leave them home alone, then they may not want to make that decision so that they don't have to be removed from the home they know and sent into a nursing home. And some of it is just pure embarrassment that they got scammed by somebody and they feel like they should have been smarter than that.
And you said it's probably double what the national number is. What do you have any sort of numbers? Is it a million? Is it 2 million?
Well,
what sort of numbers are we talking about?
They say about 1 in 5 is actually abused in some form, either the abuse, the neglect, or the exploitation, or some combination thereof. And so it's probably more like 1 in 10. Or I'm sorry, one in 2 that are actually being abused. Forgive me.
Angel, are there criminal laws that speak to elder abuse?
There are criminal laws that speak to elder abuse, and we are in the process now of informing and educating our police officers, because for those that are in the criminal practice, they understand Title 16, which is where the majority of our criminal laws are. And there is a statute in Title 16 that allows for a felony conviction if you commit some type of crime against an elder person. But there are also laws in Title 30 that protect elder persons and disabled adults that most of the people in the law enforcement industry are not quite yet aware of.
And Donald, from the civil side, who is an elder, and what are some of the things that you do from the civil side? We understand that Angel will prosecute on the criminal side.
Sure.
But what are some of the things that you do on the civil side, and who is an elder?
Typically, an elder is defined as someone who's 60 years or older. And on the civil side, some of the things that we try to do is, as you were pointing out, educate folks. Some people have in their head that if it's a family member, they couldn't possibly be committing elder abuse. This is my mom, this is my dad, this is my son, my daughter. It can't possibly be abuse, but it is. And what we do on the civil side is we advise folks about obtaining a guardianship or a conservatorship. Guardianship goes to healthcare decisions, and conservatorship goes to financial or asset management decisions. They are important tools because they act as a check on the abuse. If you believe that someone is being neglected, you apply for a guardianship. It usually takes 6 to 8 weeks. If it's an emergency, it can be done in about two weeks. And it allows someone to take over their affairs and help protect them. It's far better than having them being removed from the home when you have somebody come in and take care of them. And one of the other things I wanted to say is that abuse, neglect, and exploitation can happen in any setting, not just nursing homes, not just homes. It can be personal care homes, retirement homes. It can even be a church. So this is just one of the things you have to be on the lookout for. And if you ever see anything that you think is questionable, you can refer it to Adult Protective Services. One of the things that I'm encouraged about as being a civil lawyer is that the criminal part of this is starting to get up and running. For so long, we would contact police officers, and they would say, well, there's nothing we can do. And I think part of it's because they just didn't recognize that there were laws out there to protect seniors. And they just kind of said, well, it's a family dispute, so we're not going to get involved. It may or may not be true, but it's mom and dad and son and daughter, so we're going to let them figure it out. So that's what we do.
Kind of sounds like where we were 10 or 15 years ago with domestic violence. It's a family issue.
Absolutely. And so we do in the DeKalb County area have a multidisciplinary team where we bring the district attorney's office together, the solicitor general's office, and local law enforcement, as well as Adult Protective Services, and we review every single case that is referred to our office through Adult Protective Services to determine whether or not there needs to be some type of prosecutorial intervention. Obviously, as Mr. Horace has said, not every case rises to the level of a crime, but it's always good to review those cases so that we can get the resources to the family. And just a point of note, for the criminal side, abuse, neglect, and exploitation of an elder starts at 65.
Now, Angel, if someone suspects elder abuse, do they have to have proof, or does the mere suspicion start the process, and who exactly should they contact?
The mere suspicion actually starts the process, and they should absolutely contact Adult Protective Services if they suspect that the abuse is occurring in the home, meaning that the senior is living in the home. If that senior is in some type of long-term care facility, then they need to contact Healthcare Facilities Regulation, which is governed by the Department of Community Health. There are a lot of mandated reporters out there that don't know that they are mandated reporters, and so our goal is to go out there and educate them so that they will know if they suspect any form of abuse to start the process by contacting one of the two agencies.
And that's a really good idea just from a civil point of view, because a lot of times when there's something that we see with a patient, it's usually not just that one individual in the facility, because sometimes it's a caregiver in a nursing home that's committing these acts. And by contacting Department of Community Health, that's a big stick to make them investigate and stop any questionable behavior, because they could actually lose their license if they don't. So it's a very good stick to have.
Donald, what legal documents are available to protect or minimize elder abuse?
There is the Durable Advance Directive for Healthcare, where a person, any person of any age above 18, can decide that they want to have an advocate speak for them and make decisions for them. That's a good document to have because it can prevent you from having to get a guardianship. The other document you would probably need would be a durable power of attorney for finance. And what it does is it allows you to appoint someone to manage your finances. And again, that could prevent you from having to get a conservatorship. Although guardianships, conservatorships are great tools if and when they are needed, they can be expensive and they can be time consuming. So by getting the advance directives ahead of time, it saves you money. It also empowers you because you get to decide who's going to be your advocate.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about some of the agencies. We know that they can contact attorneys, they can contact the DA's office on law enforcement. We talked about Adult Protective Services. I think you said the Department of Community Health. Talk a little bit about those agencies and how they fit into this. What is it that they do in helping to protect some of our seniors?
Adult Protective Services is a statewide agency, and they will actually go out into the home and do an initial investigation. They have 30 days to either substantiate the claim or not. The beautiful thing about Dekalb is regardless of whether or not the claim is substantiated, it comes through our multidisciplinary team. However, throughout the state of Georgia, that's what we're working to have Dekalb serve as the model. There are other agencies in the state, such as in Chatham County, that is working with an MDT process as well. And that means that if you contact Adult Protective Services, they get in the home quicker, the cases get reviewed quicker, and the abuse stops sooner.
The other great, I hate to cut you off, the other great thing about Adult Protective Services is by them doing their investigation, if they find something, they do have the ability to refer it to the Senior Citizens Law Project, and they will, depending if the senior is indigent, they will provide legal services to that senior to stop the exploitation and also make sure the proper referrals go. So I really like that you mentioned that, because they're a very good tool.
When we return to Legally Speaking, we'll continue the discussion with attorney Angel Riley and Donald Horace. Stay with us. Welcome back. On today's show, we're discussing the rights of elders in Georgia and ways to combat elder abuse. We're joined by attorney Donald Horace and attorney Angel Riley. Prior to the break, Angel, we were discussing social service agencies that are charged with protecting seniors. Can you tell us about mandatory reporters and who is required to report suspicions of abuse?
Absolutely. There's a list that's in the statute, but some of the more common ones, which you'd be surprised by, are bankers. Bankers are required to report suspicious exploitation if they suspect it. Suspect only. It doesn't require proof. So if they suspect, they are required. Local law enforcement. You think that they would not be required because they are the law enforcement, but under the statute it does require that local law enforcement report to Adult Protective Services. Your clergymen are required to report, your doctors. So just much like in the DFAC scenario, if a doctor observes abuse or bruises on an elder's body, then they are required to report. There is actually a misdemeanor statute that makes it a crime for a mandatory reporter's failure to report.
Well, Angel, what are some of the warning signs of elder abuse?
A lot of it is sudden changes when it comes to the area of exploitation. Sudden changes in that particular senior's home, or utilities being turned off, and it's not within their character to have things like that happening. With respect to abuse, the obvious signs, the bruises. With respect to neglect, this may have been your church member, and now they're coming to church disheveled, and they're not smelling well. Those are the definite warning signs. Isolation. You can't reach your loved one on the phone anymore. These are things that you need to be aware of, and you must do your due diligence to report it if you're a mandated reporter. And we simply ask, even if you're not a mandated reporter, to call Adult Protective Services.
It's much better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely.
In the long run.
And you can report anonymously.
Okay, excellent. And Mr. Horace, if I suspect that there is abuse, let's say I have a relative that's in a nursing home or some sort of institution outside of being in a private home or a family member, what sort of recourse is there on the civil side if I suspect that is going on in a larger institution?
There are a number of ways to approach it. From the perspective of the individual that's causing the abuse, you have the usual similar remedies if they're stealing their property or using their money for things other than their care and treatment. You can sue them for death by taking or conversion. If it's the facility that's participating or turning a blind eye to it, you can sue the facility itself for participating in the abuse. And we've had some success with that. Typically, what we see, the way the issue comes to us, is that the child of the senior or a neighbor or a church member will say, something doesn't seem right there. And we think this is what's going on. And as a result of their bringing it to our attention, we'll do an investigation and find out if there's anything to it. So typically the way that we find out about it, and I think the way most law enforcement agencies find out about it too, is another family member, a church member, somebody hasn't been going to church for 3 months and they never used to miss church. Or another typical example is they just don't smell well. I mean, it's kind of, you know, politically incorrect to put it that way, but that's generally a huge clue because a lot of seniors take pride in how they look and how they present themselves.
So it's actually the simple things, not something necessarily glaring or just out there. It's something as simple as not seeing them participate in activities like church.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Donald, we've all heard reports of elder abuse. Who contacts you most often? What are some of the scenarios that you hear most often?
I'll hear something like, to answer your question, it's usually a family member or a caregiver. Somebody's coming in 3 times a week to take care of dad. And while they're there, they'll see something like, well, the only time the daughter comes by is to get his checkbook or to collect his checks. And she never speaks to him. She doesn't buy him anything. I'm paying for stuff out of my pocket. The caregiver's not getting paid on time. Her check's bouncing. There are teenagers living in the house now who are unrelated to the senior. So we'll get a call from the caregiver saying, these are not his relatives, and they are eating up all his food. They're throwing cigarettes at him, or they're playing with his oxygen tank. We get all kind of reports like that. So when those things happen, they are major flags. And I encourage everyone to report it, even if you can't prove it. Because sometimes it's too late to do anything if you wait too long.
Absolutely. Angel, what are some of the challenges that you all face in prosecuting elder abuse cases? And please describe emergency placement as well.
Absolutely. Our main challenge is most often with our seniors, it may be the mental capacity issue. A lot of times, most of our victims are being exploited because they have Alzheimer's or dementia or lack some type of mental competency, and therefore it makes it a little more difficult to prosecute. But just as we prosecute murder cases where we don't have a victim, obviously because the victim is dead, we certainly go forward with all the other evidence to prosecute when there are competency issues. Our second challenge would be where you just basically have the recanting victim, the mother who doesn't want to testify against her baby boy. And again, we just use the same resources. There is no marital privilege exception to a parent-child. Right. So we actually can compel the senior to testify if we need to. We try to be as sensitive as possible when it comes to forcing a senior to testify, but we certainly do that. With respect to emergency placement, this is the opportunity so that seniors can go ahead and report the abuse that's going on in the home without the fear of being thrown into a nursing home just to be forgotten about. With emergency placement, we've actually partnered with Emory Healthcare, and they have, upon their benevolence, given us bed space when it's available, up to 30 days. This allows Adult Protective Services to come in and intervene. As we know, they don't work on nights and weekends and holidays, and oftentimes we find ourselves in the middle of trying to place a senior during those hours. And with the benevolence of Emory, we're able to provide that emergency placement.
That is excellent. You touched on something, and I'd like both of you to speak to it. Mental capacity, we're talking about dementia, Alzheimer's. If someone has taken advantage of an elderly, have them create a new will,
right,
or have them sign over the bank accounts, and you realize that there's some dementia or Alzheimer's,